Let's find out more about them, and we have a special guest with us today, connected, Ms. Rili Djohani, their Executive Director. Good morning, Ibu Rili. How are you?
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Paul Bangkai. I'm very well, thank you. Greetings from Bali.
Yes, she's, I see that the sun is shining. She's sun-kissed, and it's a beautiful place to, talk about something I'm very curious about. The name Coral Triangle Center. What does it actually mean? Could you explain us more about your initiative?
Yes, thank you. It's great to be here on the show. The Coral Triangle Center is named after the Coral Triangle region, which is a triangular shape covering 6 countries in the region: Indonesia, Philippines, Malaysia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands. And together, they form the Coral Triangle, which is an epicenter for marine biodiversity. It harbors more than 500 species of coral reef and thousands of marine reef fish and other animals. So it's widely recognized as one of the most diverse marine area in the world. And Indonesia is at the heart of this region.
Yeah.
And we named our organization after this region, the Coral Triangle Center. So we dedicate our programs to build local capacity for long-term marine conservation. So we have education programs, training programs for local communities. We support local governments as well as non-government organizations and dive operators to provide them training and information how to better care for coral reef ecosystems.
These sound like extensive, obviously, programs. There's training programs, educational programs. Can you explain a little bit as to what these programs have to offer, who can take part, and how people can find out more about it?
Sure, thank you. We have specific training programs, usually 3 to 5 days, and we train NGOs, for example, non-government groups working with local communities on the ground.
Yeah.
And everyone can register for those trainings. Also for local communities, particularly in remote areas, local communities are key guardians to support coral reef growth, preserve them in the absence of other people who can take care of it. So we also train communities in monitoring the reefs, in helping to collect data as well, and really engage in preserving their reefs, building also on their traditional tenure systems. For example, in the Moluccas, there's a SASI system for centuries already. Local communities do conservation there to manage the coral reef ecosystems. But we also have a center in Bali called the Marine Conservation Center Learning Center, where we open for the public to learn more in a fun way about marine conservation. So we built escape rooms. So these are fun games where people can go in as a small team and they have to resolve puzzles about coral reefs, for example, about plastic pollution, and save the reefs in 1 hour, save the turtles in 1.5 hours. But in the process, they learn a lot about facts and figures on these topics. So it's really a great way to engage the larger public in raising awareness and inspire them to take action.
It's a really good way. It's like a sense of adventure as well as
Sure.
we go on a trip to Bali, and then we can schedule this with our friends. It's a great way to educate. But also, for me personally, one of the most famous coral reef problem that I've heard of was definitely the Great Barrier Reef. But the ecosystem, the coral ecosystem here in Indonesia, for instance, I don't hear about that very often. Do you think the public generally is already very much aware of, the problems and issues that the coral ecosystem faces here in Indonesia as well?
Yes, I think compared to 20 years ago, I think the awareness is already much more so than before, particularly because of documentaries on television and through online access to information. But I think right now it's so much more important to engage the public and young people as well in conserving coral reef areas. And I think it's very helpful to get children, for example, already engaged in beach cleanups, in raising their awareness about the importance of coral reefs and oceans for food security, for fisheries, for our oxygen on the planet. And so the younger we can start with ocean awareness, the better. So we focus also more and more now on reaching out to school children and providing, again, fun learning materials, curricula to get them engaged. And we also work more closely now with teachers and educators to give them the tools to give this ocean awareness to their pupils. But I think it's even now more important to reach out and educate the public about oceans because they are in peril. A lot of threats, as you mentioned, it's about overfishing, just fishing. We have issues of climate change, plastic pollution. So we really need to work together to get the oceans clean again.
Rili, you mentioned how the coral reefs and the corals are so important to marine wildlife, to have a healthy ocean. But why is that? What would happen if coral reefs continue to get damaged or destroyed? What would happen to our ocean, and what would happen to the marine wildlife in the ocean?
Well, that will be quite disastrous actually for marine life and for the oceans. They are a critical habitat for a lot of our fisheries, for our fish. So they are protecting a lot of fish in their earlier years. If you lose the coral reefs, a lot of habitat for the fish will be destroyed, and therefore our food security will also be in peril. So it's literally very important to keep the oceans, the coral reefs preserved. They also are among the most diverse coral ecosystems in the world, like the tropical rainforest. So they form a refuge and a genetic pool for a lot of life in the oceans. And they are also often referred to as the lungs of the sea. So they provide also oxygen for a lot of the oceans as well. So it's really a critical ecosystem for our survival on this planet.
Right.
So, also out of curiosity, there are, as mentioned before, irresponsible fishermen who use explosives to catch fish, and many people litter in the ocean as well. Of course, that would affect, the ecosystem there. And I was just curious on what is the current state of the coral reefs in Indonesia, and how are you conserving, or what is the process of, getting the data and main focus on Indonesia, of course, how are you conserving it and the marine ecosystem here, coral reefs in Indonesia?
Yeah, so the coral reefs are in peril in Indonesia and around the globe. So we really try to protect them by establishing marine protected areas.
Yeah.
So we work closely with the Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, local communities, other sectors, also with the dive operators as well, to establish those marine protected areas. For example, we have a learning site in Nusa Penida, offshore Bali, as well as Pulau Ai and Run in the Banda Islands in the Moluccas.
Yep.
These are areas with a high diversity for corals and fish, and we work together there with all the stakeholders, also with young people, women, fishermen, to protect those resources. So we establish marine protected areas, we collect data, we do surveys underwater, look at how healthy the reefs are, whether they're damaged, prepare zoning plans. So we also consult a lot with the local people living there, engage them in the process, and work with the local governments to set up a zoning plan that will then be legalized and help support to regulate how the coral reefs can be used. So you have a protection zone where nothing is allowed, but also zones for fishing, for tourism. That way, you can still manage the area well, it can still be utilized, but also it can be very well protected and help replenish coral reefs for future generations. So it's through the on-the-ground field programs, establishing marine protected areas, that we try to support our coral reefs here in Indonesia. And right now we support 7 marine protected areas in Indonesia and in Timor-Leste as well. covering about 387,000 hectares. So it's really very important that we support the Indonesian government. They have set aside a goal to have 32.5 million hectares, or 10% of Indonesia's marine waters, to be set aside in MPAs by 2030. So we support the government with providing training, capacity building, communication support, and work with other NGOs to achieve that goal. And it's not only about establishing it, but also ensure they are effectively well protected against like overfishing, destructive fishing, a negative impact of tourism, or plastic pollution and climate change issues, as well as ocean acidification. So for us, it's very important that Indonesia can reach its goal by 2030, and hopefully beyond, we can support a global initiative to set aside 30% of the oceans in marine protected areas worldwide. It will be scientifically a very significant effort to protect the most critical habitats for the ocean, for our own future especially.
Well, very well put, Bu Rili. Also, through programs like Adopt a Coral, these are how people like us can also do our part to help. A last question before we let you go. Just one quick note, perhaps from you. Today is World Oceans Day, Bu Rili. So what are your hopes for the future of our maritime ecosystem?
Well, I hope that we can work to more and more, particularly during these difficult times in the pandemic. It became clear how connected we are. We are one planet, we have one ocean, and we need to work together to really safeguard these critical ecosystems for our livelihoods and also for the future of our children and grandchildren. So I think the World Ocean Day is a great effort to raise this awareness and inspire people to take action. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Bu Rili, for your time this morning. Thank you for joining us.
Take care, Bu Rili.
Thank
Take care,
you.
Bu Rili.
Take care. Talk
Thank
to
you
you
so
again
much.
soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.